and welcome to the Money Maverick podcast, the show Wall Street doesn't want you to listen to. I'm Tim Turley, the host for today's episode. We're coming to you from the Money Maverick studio in Salt Lake City, Utah. Before we introduce our new Money Maverick, I wanted to let you know how you can learn more about principles-based planning and some of the things we talk about on the podcast. Simply go to www.uniqueadvantage.biz. That's www.uniqueadvantage.biz. And you can read all about our team and how we help people. Okay, so let me start out with a full disclosure regarding our guest Maverick today, Dr. Paul Jenkins. Even if Dr. Paul was not married to my awesome cousin, I would still have pursued him to the ends of the earth to be a guest on the podcast. He's an amazing human being. In fact, we will have several conversations with him over the next year if he's willing to do so. He's got so much to offer. You're about to hear from someone who knows the science and presents it in an engaging and very fun way. You will get a glimpse into very powerful psychological principles that make an immediate difference, whether it's your personal, family, professional lives. Much of what we talk about in terms of money actually is very emotional. I think if you think about that, you'll recognize how much our mindset comes into play when we talk about finances and money. With over 30 years of experience and a PhD, Dr. Paul has the knowledge and ability to show you how to power up your positivity, take control, and increase your happiness. I personally, I've read Dr. Paul's book, Pathological Positivity, highly recommend it, and have taken one of his courses he offers to the public, and it is really great. Dr. Paul hosts Live on Purpose Radio TV. Sorry, it's not Live on Purpose Radio, Paul. It's Live on Purpose TV, and that's on YouTube.
Both.
And both. Okay, radio and TV. That's awesome. And you can find that on YouTube. And he has 400,000 plus subscribers around the world, and they have benefited from his calm and passionate manner. I love that it's calm and passionate at the same time. Today, we are going to get a firm foundation on the principles Dr. Paul teaches. And again, in future episodes, we'll dive more into the psychology of money with him. Dr. Paul, welcome to the Money Maverick Show. We're so glad to have you.
Wow, Tim, it's about time, don't you think?
Yes.
And I love this, the Money Maverick. The Money Maverick, that, you know what that brings to my mind is someone who's not too attached to all of the false traditions that fly around related to money. And so I love that. And you said something about people getting emotional, or the emotional part of money is huge. Tim, did you know that money is one of our 7 key relationships?
Yes, that's right. I remember that from the course.
Which is why we get so attached. And in our relationship with money causes all kinds of problems with money, or causes us to have a harmonious relationship. And it all starts with the way we think.
Well, that is, and we'll dive into that. Not sure how much we'll get into that today necessarily. We may, because it's kind of a free flow, which we love to do. But we definitely will have you back on. I know you're developing some courses, or have developed some courses specifically with financial programs, which I'm really excited to tell the audience about. Well, before we get into kind of what the foundational principles are of what you teach people, give us a little bit of background on you, on Dr. Paul before he was Dr. Paul. You know, what was your childhood like? How did you end up having an interest in the field of psychology? You know, your background, before you started this amazing Live on Purpose program and the materials that you've developed, what did you do before that? And we always ask our Maverick, what was it like growing up in your family or in your school system or whatever when it came to understanding money and finances? So kind of
so we're going way back. Okay,
yeah.
Well, I was born at a very young age. And then I don't think we need to go that far back. I am a twin. That had a lot to do with my upbringing. I am also my own fourth cousin. And I don't think you want to go there necessarily, but
No, but that's interesting.
it's actually true. I mean, I have pioneer ancestors who helped to settle the state of Utah 150 years ago, or however long ago that was. And a lot of those folks kind of knew each other anyway. My parents were third cousins, which is totally legal in most states. And that makes me my own fourth cousin. Since the children of third cousins are fourth cousins, that's probably TMI, Tim. But you know, when it comes to professional, I started out as a chemical engineering major. Growing up, I was really good at school. I did all the math and science. I was the valedictorian of my little high school, which is really impressive until you realize it was me and my twin sister in our graduating class. It wasn't quite that small. But I went into college thinking, okay, I'm going to go become an engineer. In my small town where I grew up, there weren't any psychologists. I had no exposure to that as a young man. It wasn't until my first year at Brigham Young University, as a freshman there, I was in the honors program, and I got some exposure to psychology for the first time. And it lit me up. And then I took 2 years off and went and served a volunteer mission for my church in Finland, where I met your cousin, by the way.
All I remember is Mitakulu or something like that.
Yeah, Mitakulu. It's a greeting in Finnish, right? And it was during that experience, Tim, that I realized I really get excited about conversations with people that have lasting, meaningful impact and connecting them with principles. Now, when I say principles, I mean natural laws, like gravity, for example. You never get up in the morning and think, oh, I wonder if gravity's on today. It tends to be, right? And there are principles that drive our psychology. Well, I started to discover that, so I switched my major to psychology and never looked back. I went through, got a PhD. I tell my kids I went through the 21st grade. That helps them to wrap their head around just what that was.
Yeah, excellent.
But then, you know, I didn't stop there, Tim, because I was a really good psychologist. I still am a psychologist, but I had a traditional psychotherapy practice for the first 15 years of my career. And I did it all. I was evaluating people, giving them diagnoses, filling out the treatment plans, working with their insurance companies. I even got into the yuck work, where I did child custody evaluations for the court for 13 years. Bitter, angry, divorcing people, can't figure out how to share their kids. I've seen, after 30 years of clinical experience, you can't shock me. I've heard some of the darndest crap you can imagine.
Yep.
But the last 15 years, the most recent 15 years, I'll put it that way because I don't think it's my last 15. But we'll see.
Not.
I switched over to positive psychology. And just to give you a sense of what that means, if you put your mental health on a spectrum or a continuum, clear over on the left end is the sick end. Diagnosis, pathology, treatment, all that fun stuff. Well, what's on the other end of that spectrum? This is what really lights me up. And to understand what's on that other end, let's go to the middle first. The middle is health. Now, you'd think health is the opposite of sick, but I'm putting it in the middle. Because think about it. You could be sick, in bed, with a fever, throwing up. There comes a time you can get out of bed and you're not sick. But that doesn't mean you're truly fit, thriving, prospering. That's over here at the other end of the spectrum. I've moved my practice from this end of the spectrum over here in the sick end to the fit, thriving, prospering end. And there's some overlap in the middle. I mean, think about it. Everybody's got issues, right? Current company included.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody does.
we can deal with those issues according to the same principles that help people to get out of bed, but there is so much more available. And so I fired all the insurance companies. I won't even work with them anymore. Nobody gets a diagnosis, even if they deserve it. We're working on applying principles to help people actually get to the thriving end of their mental health, their relationships, including their relationship with money. Remember, I said that's one of your 7 key relationships. And the same principles apply. So it's been really exciting to do that. I've given you a really quick overview of my career in a nutshell.
Well, what have you found in the most recent practice of positivity on the other end of the spectrum? How do people respond to that? What generally, if you were to give an overview of how people respond to the other end of the spectrum, like you said, most people would put health at the end of the spectrum because it's opposite of sickness, but positivity is now on the other end of the spectrum. So how do people take that? How do they respond to that? Is it a jolt to their system, or what do they do?
Most people don't know what they don't know. And think about what I'm saying here. We know what we know. We even know that there's some things we don't know, but then there's this other area where we don't even know that we don't know it. Is that too loopy, or are you following that? So it's like turning the lights on sometimes for the first time. When we get to health, we think, oh, okay, I'm good. And don't even realize there's more. I used to sponsor speed reading classes. I don't know if you've ever taken one of those, Tim, but it's fascinating to me. When we learn how to read in school, we get to a certain point where we can read the words and we're comprehending what we're reading, and our teacher signs off on us that we are readers now, and we stop. When we get to a certain level of fluency with our reading that is limited by things we don't even notice, like sub-vocalization, for example. Most people, when they're reading, they're moving their lips because they're saying the words in their head. Guess what? That limits your reading speed to your speaking speed. And it can go so much faster. When I learned this, I took my reading from 300 words a minute to 3,000 words a minute. And it just blew the roof off of everything. I didn't even know that was possible. And the same thing happens when people get into positive psychology. They don't realize what's possible. And my job is to illuminate the obvious, which is cool, Tim. I get paid to tell people things they already know.
Me too, by the way.
Yes, but there's obvious things. You know this from your own practice. There's obvious things that are completely unnoticed until called to your attention. Okay, like your shirt. Can you feel it?
Yes.
Now
I can, but before I didn't even notice it.
You didn't even notice it. Your neurons are working all the time, but something is obvious as the feeling of your shirt on your skin is unnoticed until it's called to your attention. Or the fact that we're speaking English. Did you notice? Oh, no. It's obvious.
Obvious, but didn't think about it.
But you didn't notice, you didn't think about it. That's exactly the realm that I get to work in, because most of the processes that are going on all the time in your mind are obvious once they're called to your attention, but completely unnoticed up until that point. You have to be able to notice it in order to choose what direction it's going to go.
So when you call attention to this, right, it's unnoticed before, even though it's obvious, and you call attention to it, are most people not positive? Do they think they're positive until it's called out, and then they think about it and go, wow, I'm really not as positive as I could be. I think I'm healthy, but man, I've got some thoughts that might be a little destructive.
Tim, most people don't even know what positivity is. In fact, they think that it's just always feeling happy. That's not positivity. That how you feel is like the weather report. It's got some information to give you, but that's not positivity. And this is a aha moment for a lot of folks when they see what their brain's doing. Let me share with you what I mean. First, let's turn on the metacognition. Now, that's a fancy psychobabble term. If you break it down, cognition means thinking. Metacognition is a higher level. It's thinking about thinking. Okay, now that I mention it, do you notice that you can do this?
Yes.
Okay, this is good. And be careful with it, you can hurt yourself. But notice that you can think about your own thinking. And this is huge because metacognition creates a space. In that space is where choice exists. And I'll say that again, it's important. Metacognition creates a space. In that space is where choice exists. And until we see it as a choice, it's not. We're going to roll with our programming. So being aware is the first step. And I'm not here to tell people how to think. I don't have that kind of authority. I want them to see that they are thinking and that thinking has some predictable consequences, including how we feel. So as we turn on the metacognition, the next thing I would invite you to do is notice there are two processes, and there's probably more than two, but we're just going to cover two today. There are two processes that are constantly going on in your own mind. And this is like gravity. You can't turn it off. But being aware of it could certainly benefit you. Okay? Here's the first one. Judgment. Now, do you notice, as I call your attention to it, that you are constantly judging? Aren't you?
Yes.
It's okay, Jim. We all
okay.
are.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm just inviting you to notice it. You judge yourself pretty harshly sometimes, I might add. Yeah. You judge your spouse, your kids. You judge the economy. You judge your bank account. You judge your business. You judge your coworkers. You judge your community, your church, your synagogue. You judge the government. You're judging me. It's cool. I'm judging you. You see it?
Yes.
I invite you to see that. Now, judgment. Now, I call it evaluation because that's a nicer word.
Yeah, nicer word.
And by the way, if people are trying to take notes, I can save you some time on that. I've got a little mini book called Portable Positivity where I explain the whole model with illustrations. And I've got a free download of this mini book for anyone listening to this show. And we'll put the link in the show notes, but it's pretty easy to remember. It's just my name, Dr. Paul Jenkins, drpauljenkins.com/Money Maverick.
There you go.
Can you remember that? And
Absolutely.
You can get a free download of this mini book. Now, I only mention that because sometimes I get into this and people are like, oh, I should rewind. I should take some notes. Yeah, you can do that too, but I'll send you the mini book for free. I want you to have this model because it puts you back into a position of choice and control over your thoughts. What you do with it after that is totally up to you.
Oh, this is fascinating. As we're talking about money and finances, it's the exact same thing. Like you said, it applies to everything. And most people are never aware or do not know how to create awareness when it comes to their finances. They don't even know how to do it.
Right.
And now that you mention it, when we take people through the process of learning principles of finance, they didn't even know that there was a space available to become aware of the obvious. They know that It's obvious, but they don't even think about it until it's brought to their attention.
Exactly. And sometimes we avoid thinking about it because we're afraid of what it might mean. I had this conversation earlier today with someone who's considering coming into my certification program. I provide a certification as a positivity practitioner. And this man has been considering it for quite some time. And he said, but I can't afford it. Well, notice what happens when your brain says, I can't. What's the next step?
Your brain will work as hard as it can to make sure you can't afford it.
Well, it's going to prove you right. I mean, your brain is there to keep you safe and prove you right. Those are the two main jobs of your brain. And so once you decide that, your brain's going to try to prove you right about it. And there's no next step. I can't? Oh, well, I guess I'm done then. Curl up, fetal position in the corner. What happens if we switch that to how can I? And some people say that. They're like, well, how can I afford it? And it's not even a question. It's a statement disguised as a question. Watch your punctuation. What happens if we put a question mark on that? How can I afford it?
Oh, Paul, do we know, is the science behind the psychology of saying, how can I afford it versus I can't afford it? What do we know what happens neurologically when we ask ourselves the question in that different way? What happens?
So you're asking a really important, simple question with a fairly complex answer. Here's the short version. There's chemistry, there's neural pathways, and there's energy. And all of those things come together. Energy precedes outcome. Energy precedes outcome. And that has to do with our chemistry and our neurology, everything that's connected to our brain. Your brain is the biggest energy hog of the entire system of your body. Energy is important to your brain. So let's go back to what I was sharing. Evaluation or judgment implies comparison with some standard, right? Like I ask my audiences all the time, am I a tall man? And I'm right there on the stage in front of them. And they're like, yeah, you're pretty tall. And then I show them a picture of me with Mark Eaton. You remember Mark.
Right, 7'4".
7'4". Mark passed away a couple of years ago, and we've missed him in our Speakers Association. But next to Mark, I'm a shrimp. I'm 6'2", Tim. But next to Mark, I barely make his shoulder. And so I put this picture up there, and people are like, oh, he's really tall. And I'm like, well, yeah, am I tall? It depends. Your own answer to that depends on who or what you compare me to. So just notice that. So when I ask you, and this is a trick question, okay, did I mention it's a trick question?
Yes.
Right. This is a trick question, Tim. How you doing financially? Okay, now notice as I ask the question, your brain gives you an answer. What's the truth of it? And this irritates and annoys people sometimes, but it is what it is.
So do our brains typically go to a comparison to other people immediately when we ask ourselves a question like that?
It's not necessarily other people, but it is a comparison with some standard. So if I compare how I'm doing financially to Donald Trump, how am I doing? Or Bill Gates, or the sheik of whatever.
Yeah, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince, whoever.
I'm a shrimp compared to Mark Eaton. What if I compare myself? Tim, you and I and everyone listening to us here today is in the top 10% of the world's wealthy. Because when you take the population of the entire planet, how are you doing financially? I got to visit Kenya with my daughter in March, where we served the Maasai people out on the Masai Mara, the #1 safari destination on the planet, by the way. And these people live in huts made out of sticks and mortared together with mud and cow dung. Some of these families cannot afford $1 a month for a water kiosk. Okay, so how am I doing financially? Well, it depends on who you compare it to. So that's why I said it was a trick question. The truth is, it is what it is. Meaning, the way things are right now without changing anything, and to evaluate it, which you can't turn off, you have to compare it to something. So if you conclude that you're not doing very well financially, that tells me that you are comparing your situation to something better. And I don't mean someone better, it could be, but something better. Well, if you compare how you're doing to something worse, how you doing? Oh, pretty good. You'll take this over that. So do you see it?
Yep. Yeah.
Now, it's not right or wrong. Just notice that you're making a judgment about that, and that judgment matters. Focus on the feelings for a minute. Tim, as we're having this conversation, notice that the feelings are generated when your brain does the judgment. So if I take how I'm doing and compare it to something better, how do I feel about how I'm doing?
Not good.
Not good. I'm falling short, inadequate. This sucks. And you're always right about how you feel. How you feel is 100% consistent with the way your mind does this. Well, how do I feel if I compare how I'm doing to something worse? Now, how do I feel about what I've got?
The top of the world.
Better. Yeah. Grateful. Peace. Abundance. All right. But we're not done yet, because our brain, I told you there's at least two processes. Let's move off of evaluation. The other thing that our brain constantly does, you can't turn this off any more than you can turn off judgment or gravity. Creation. Creation of what is to be. And that doesn't exist yet. We haven't created it yet. So all we can do is imagine what is to be. And we don't know. Tim, how are you doing next week?
I have no idea.
Now you chuckle because you don't know. Now you've got guesses and predictions, and some people will say, I'm doing great next week. You don't know. You've got something to do with it. Don't forget that. But you don't know, so all you can do is imagine. Now, what happens when we imagine or predict or expect that what's coming is even worse than what we've already got? How do we feel?
Terrible.
I'm watching your eyes as we have this conversation. You're like, oh, there's fear, there's anxiety. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, in fact, that's the definition of anxiety. When we imagine, because we don't know, that what's coming is worse. And our brain is there to keep us safe and prove us right. So it's like, oh no, and chemicals get squirted into your bloodstream. Now, how do we feel? Focus on the feeling. How do we feel when we imagine or predict or expect that what's coming is even better than what we've already got? How do we feel?
Awesome. That's where positivity comes in.
Exactly. The positivity is not thinking everything is peachy, pasting on a smile and pretending there's no pain. Positivity is taking what it is, no matter what it is, and choosing a position, also known as attitude, choosing a position relative to what it is in those two modes. Evaluation, how am I going to judge this? And in creation, where am I going with this? That's what positivity is. It's simply choosing to be in what I call the positivity vector.
That's really interesting. So when it comes financially speaking, the first step, it seems to me, is, and we now that you've explained it, I know what we do, but I couldn't really put it into words until we talked this morning.
Yeah.
But when we meet with people, without knowing we're doing it, we're psychologically getting them to a spot where they recognize that they are where they are. It is what it is right now. It doesn't matter. They are where they are. This is your snapshot. This is your starting point. And that's okay. But there's a lot of great things that are going to happen from this day forward because you have the ability to improve. I didn't explain it the way you probably would to somebody, but yeah, you accept where you are today financially in this case, and it's okay. But you have the ability to create anything you want, since we don't know what we're going to need a week from now or 5 years from now or a year from now. But we have the ability to positively shape our future.
I think where we get stuck most of the time is in a negative evaluation of what it is. So like when your clients come into you and they explain where they are financially, maybe even with a little shame or an apologetic sense of, oh, this isn't very good. Or can you relate to that? Well, is it good or is it bad? And the truth is, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. And we are judging it. Have you noticed a difference when you're working with your clients? If someone comes in and they hate where they are versus someone comes in feeling grateful for where they are. Have you noticed the difference? And it doesn't matter what the numbers are. It does not matter what the number. I had to go through a bankruptcy to learn this, Tim. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. You know what was the first thing I noticed when I came out of that bankruptcy court? Everything was still in color. And somehow that surprised me. I don't know what I was expecting. Some old 20s movie where everybody's dressed in black and it's all somber. I don't know. But everything's in color. The breeze is blowing through the trees. Birds are singing. Kids playing in the playground. I'm like, wait, what?
I thought my life was over.
I thought the world was screeching to a halt here. No, it wasn't. It just, am I in a bad position? Am I in a good position? Choose. Choose your position about that, because that energy, remember, energy precedes outcome, because we're not done yet. We got to go create something. And guess what you get to start with? What it is.
That is awesome. Is it possible to have false positivity? In other words, what if you make $300,000 a year and you think you're doing great, or you make $1 million a year and you don't need anybody's help, mm-hmm. But what if where you are, just because you don't know what you don't know, maybe you're in a spot that is pretty fragile in case unexpected life events hit you and you're not in a position to take care of that. So is there such thing as having a false positive? Maybe you think you're okay, but you need to be a little more realistic. I don't know if that makes sense.
I had one of my podcast guests coined this term for me, and I've really appreciated it. She says sometimes when she's talking about principles of positivity, people say, well, I'm a realist, as if that's a better position to take. I don't know. But her response was, yes, and I am an equal opportunity realist. Meaning I'm not going to give more precious life energy to negative thinking than to positive thinking. What if positivity is not about pretending there's nothing wrong? That's not what it is. And I would think false positivity is, when you say that, Tim, I think about what is going around in the media a little bit around toxic positivity. The title of my book is Pathological Positivity. That's different. Yeah. But toxic positivity, the way that it's hitting the media, is this tendency to ignore pain, difficulty, risk, and just pretend that everything's peachy. That's enormously dangerous.
Got it. That's what I was really asking. You said it very well. So toxic positivity can be damaging.
Yes, in the sense that you are avoiding or denying the opposition that is inherent in our life. There's an ancient Taoist symbol called yin and yang. I have a little model of it somewhere here on my desk. You know the one that I'm talking about.
Yes. Yep.
And it's a very familiar symbol because it has shown up in every major religion and philosophy and train of thought through the Earth's history. And it has to do with this idea that there's always an opposite. Negativity would be saying that that's bad. Positivity is accepting that there's upsides and downsides to everything. And so it is, in my mind, the ultimate realism. It's acknowledging the truth that there has to be an opposition in everything. Every up has a down, every light has a dark, every sick has a health. I mean, there's this opposition that permeates our entire existence. And positivity is embracing that, not just accepting it, embracing it and loving it. Just a quick personal example, Tim. I got a call from my son about 3 months ago. Dad, I have cancer. Okay, as a parent, that's not the call you want to get. But Tim, I practice what I preach. And I heard my brain tell me, I'm so glad he wasn't killed in a head-on collision. Okay, because given the choice, I'll take this. Now, compared to no cancer, this sucks.
Right.
And I flew out there to support his first round of chemo a couple of weeks ago. I got to spend more time with my oldest son in the last month than I have in the last decade. Quality time. This is not superficial. Can you picture that? Now, is cancer good or bad? I don't know. It is what it is. What am I going to compare it to? Do you see what I'm saying? So positivity is not denying the pain. It's not denying the disease. It's choosing a position relative to it. And that matters moving forward. There was a groundbreaking study done at Stanford years ago with breast cancer patients. Guess what? Survival improves with mood, which can be chosen through positivity. Interesting.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. That's actually a perfect way to kind of wrap up our segment here. Thank you for sharing everything you did. Paul, before we go to the Money Maverick tip of the week, kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, and maybe you could relate it to positivity in general or even positivity in money. It doesn't matter. But something practical that people can take away from listening to this and they can implement immediately once they stop listening and they can put in the life. So we'll get to that in a second. But before we do, tell us again how people can get a hold of you. Listen to your material, all the material you have out there. What are some good ways to get a hold of you and your program?
I'll go back to what I offered you today. Come and get a free copy of my mini book. It describes the model that I'm talking about in detail with illustrations. I will put this in your hands for free. Just go to drpauljenkins.com, spelled with a DR, /Money Maverick. Okay, the name of this podcast. And I will put that in your hands for free. You can get the printed copy. If you pay me for shipping, I'll put one in the mail. But you get a free digital download of that. That's the best way. And you mentioned, Tim, I'm all over YouTube. I've got a podcast. Live on Purpose Radio is the podcast. Live on Purpose TV is what you can look for at YouTube. They're totally separate shows. And you'll see different content in both places. That's probably the best way.
Okay, that's fantastic. I hope people will dive into those. So as we end today, what's a quick and easy practical tip, a Maverick tip of the week on what people can take and do something about right now?
There's two parts to this, and it has to do with the two things that I shared with you, evaluation and creation. The first one is called the gratitude power up. This is the most powerful way I know to get yourself into a positive position in evaluation mode. And then the second one is better by 8. So the positivity power or the gratitude power up is this. For the next 5 days, you make a written list of 25 things for which you are sincerely grateful. Now, here's the power up part. Most people, when they make a gratitude list, they do the wimpy stuff that's easy to be grateful for, family and health and puppies and rainbows and indoor plumbing. And you can do some of the easy stuff, but I want at least half of your list every day. That's 13 if you're doing the math. At least half of your list every day is about cancer, divorce, bankruptcy, injury, diagnosis. What have you got? Okay, something in your life that is hard, difficult, painful, frustrating, kicking your butt. And I'm not saying be grateful for the cancer. I told you we got cancer. I'm saying open it up. Rummage around in there, look, find something that you truly are grateful for, and don't put it on your list unless you're grateful. I am so grateful that I have spent quality time with my oldest son. It's been sweet. Am I grateful for that? Yes. Am I grateful for the cancer? That's a little harder. All right, but that's where I found it. Okay, you got it? That's a gratitude power.
I still have my list I did with that exercise from years and years ago.
Time to redo it, Tim.
I have time to redo it. You're right.
And don't repeat anything on tomorrow's list. It's on today's. Whole new list tomorrow. People are like, that's a lot. Really? Because it used to be 100 a day. Do you want to go back to that? Oh, it doesn't seem like so much now. See how your brain can't turn this off?
Right.
All right, here's better by 8. And this has to do with creation mode. How sure are you that you'll be around at 8 o'clock? Pretty darn?
Pretty darn sure. Yeah.
Okay. You've got a pretty good track record. You've been around for every 8 o'clock your whole life, and there's 2 every day if you don't get up early.
Right.
All right. Look, things cannot be exactly the same at 8 o'clock. They can't be. You're going to be older at least, right? So better by 8 is this. What could I do to make things a little better by 8? Now, we already know you can make things worse. Don't do this. But ask your brain to give you an idea. What could I do in my finances specifically, since this is the money maverick? All right. What could I do to make my finances better by 8? I'm not talking next week, next month, or next year. I'm talking 8 o'clock. Ask your brain to give that to you. And it doesn't have to be finances. It could be your relationship. It could be your health. It could be anything. But since we're talking about money, what could I do to make things better by 8? Now, what do you notice your brain doing?
Thinking about what I can do to make it better by 8.
Yes. You don't have to transform everything, but there's something you could do. I guarantee. Ask your brain to give that to you. If you'll do that for the same 5 days, you get to have 10 upgrades. How sweet and awesome is that?
That is great. Well, that is fantastic. Dr. Paul Jenkins, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Money Maverick podcast. With your permission, we'd love to have you back for some future conversations where we can dive a little bit deeper into the relationship between positivity and emotion when it comes to money.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, everybody.